Welcome back, third grade. I'm going to read chapter 2 of our story on the banks of Plum Creek. Chapter 2 is called The House in the Ground. Early in the morning, Pa helped Mr. Hanson move the wagon bows and cover onto Mr. Hanson's wagon. Then they brought everything out of the dugout house up to the bank, and they packed it into that covered wagon. So I'm just going to stop for a second, and what they're talking about is this is a wagon that's not covered, where the people are just riding along. But if they wanted to cover a wagon, what they would do is they would put these bows that went like that, and then they would add the cover so that they had something above them. So they put the cover on. Mr. Hanson offered to help move the things from Pa's wagon into the dugout, but Ma said, "No, Charles, we'll move in when you come back." So Pa hitched Pet and Patty to Mr. Hanson's wagon. He tied Bunny behind it, and he rode away to town with Mr. Hanson. Laura watched Pet and Patty and Bunny going away. Her eyes smarted, and her throat ached. Pet and Patty arched their necks and their manes, and their tails rippled in the wind. They went away gaily, not knowing they were never coming back. The creek was singing to itself down among the willows, and the soft wind bent the grasses over the top of the bank. The sun was shining all around. The wagon was clean and wide space to be explored. The first thing was to untie Jack from the wagon wheel. Mr. Hanson's 2 dogs had gone away, and Jack could now run about as he pleased. He was so glad that he jumped up against Laura to lick her face and made her sit down hard. Then he ran to the path, and Laura ran after him. Ma picked up Carrie and said, "Come, Mary, let's go down to look at the dugout." Jack was the first at the door. It was open. He looked in, and then he waited for Laura. All around the door, green vines were growing out of the grassy bank, and they were full of flowers, red and blue and purple and rosy pink and white striped flowers, cut all their throats wide open as if they were singing glory to the morning. These were morning glory flowers. Laura went under those singing flowers into the dugout. It was one room, all white. The earth walls had been smoothed and whitewashed. The earth floor was smooth and hard. When Ma and Mary stood in the doorway, the light went dim. There was a small greased paper window beside the door, but the wall was so thick that the light from the window stayed near the window. Okay, I'm going to show you what it looks like as they're walking down the path to see it. So there's the door, and there's the window that they're talking about. The front wall was built of sod. Mr. Hanson had dug out his house, and then he had cut long strips of prairie sod and laid them one on top of another to make the front wall. It was a good thick wall with not one crack in it. No cold could get through that wall. Ma was pleased. She said, "It's small, but it's clean and pleasant." Then she looked up at the ceiling and said, "Look, girls." The ceiling was made of hay. Willow boughs had been laid across, and their branches woven together, but here and there the hay that had been spread out showed through. "Well," said Ma. They all went up the path and stood on the roof of that house. No one would have guessed it was a roof. Grass grew on it and waved in the wind just like all the grass along the creek bank. "Goodness," said Ma, "anyone could walk over this house and not even know it was there." But Laura spied something. She bent over and parted the grass with her hands, and then she cried, "I've found the stovepipe hole! Stovepipe hole! Look, Mary, look!" Ma and Mary stopped to look, and Carrie leaned out from Ma's arm and looked, and Jack came pushing to look. They could look right down into the whitewashed room under the grass. They looked at it until Ma said, "We'll brush the place out, and we'll move in what we can before Pa comes back. Mary and Laura, you bring the water pails." Mary carried the large pail, and Laura carried the small one, and they went down the path again. Jack ran ahead and took his place by the door. Ma found a willow twig broom in a corner, and she brushed the walls carefully. Mary watched Carrie to keep her from falling down in the creek, and Laura took the little pail and went for water. She hoppity-skipped down the stair steps to the edge of the little bridge across the creek. The bridge was one wide plank. The other end was under a willow tree. The tall willows fluttered slender leaves up against the sky, and the little willows grew around them in clumps. They shaded all the ground, and it was cool and bare. The path went across it to a little spring where cool, clear water fell into a tiny pool and then ran trickling to the creek. Laura filled the little pail and went back across the sunny footbridge and up the steps. She went back and forth, fetching water in the little pail and bringing it into the big pail set on a bench inside the doorway. Then she helped Ma bring down from the wagon everything they could carry. They had moved nearly everything into the dugout when Pa came rattling down the path. He was carrying a little tin stove and 2 pieces of stovepipe. "Whew," he said, settling them down. "I'm glad I had to carry them only 3 miles. Think of it, Caroline. The town is only 3 miles away. Just a nice walk." "Well, Hanson's on his way west, and the place is ours. How do you like it, Caroline?" "I like it," said Ma, "but I don't know what to do about the beds. I don't want to put them on the floor." "What's the matter with that?" Pa asked her. We've been sleeping on the ground." "Well, that's different," said Ma. "I don't like to sleep on the floor in a house." "Well, that's soon fixed," said Pa. "I'll cut some willow boughs to spread the beds on for tonight. Tomorrow I'll find some straight willow poles and I'll make a couple of bedsteads." He took his axe and he went whistling up the path, over the top of the house and down the slope beyond it to the creek. There lay a tiny valley where willows grew thick all along the water. Laura ran at his heels. "Let me help, Pa," she panted. "I can carry some." "Why, so you can," said Pa, looking down at her with his twinkling eyes. "There's nothing like help when a man has a big job to do." Pa often said he didn't know how he would manage without Laura. She had helped him make the new door for the log house in Indian Territory. Now she helped him carry the leafy willow boughs and spread them in the dugout. Then she went with him to the stable. All 4 walls of the stable were built of sod, and the roof was willow boughs and hay with sod over it. The roof was so low that Pa's head touched it when he stood up straight. There was a manger of willow poles, and 2 oxen were in there. One was a huge gray ox with short horns and gentle eyes. The other was small with fierce horns and wild eyes. He was bright red-brown all over. "Hello, Bright," Pa said to him. "And how are you, Pete, old fella?" he asked the big ox, slapping him gently. "Stand back out of the way, Laura," he said, "till we see how these cattle act. We've got to take them to water." He put ropes around their horns and led them out of the stable. They followed him slowly down the slope to a level path that went through green rushes to the flat edge of the creek. Laura slowly tagged after them. Their legs were clumsy and their big feet split in the middle. Their noses were broad and slimy. Laura stayed outside the stable while Pa tied them to the manger. They walked with him toward the dugout. "Pa," she asked in a little voice, "did Pet and Patty truly want to go out west?" "Yes, Laura," Pa told her. "Oh, Pa," she said, and there was a tremble in her voice, "I don't think I like cattle very much." Pa took her hand and comforted it in his big one. He said, "We must do the best we can, Laura, and not grumble. What must be done is best done cheerfully. And someday we will have horses again." "When, Pa?" she asked him, and he said, "When we raise our first crop of wheat." Then they went into the dugout. Ma was cheerful. Mary and Carrie were already washed and combed, and everything was neat. The beds were made on the willow boughs, and supper was ready. After supper, they all sat on the path before the door. Pa and Ma had boxes to sit on. Carrie cuddled sleepily in Ma's lap, and Mary and Laura sat on the hard path, their legs hanging over its sharp edge. Jack turned around 3 times and then lay down with his head against Laura's knee. They all sat quiet, looking across Plum Creek and the willows and watching the sun sink far away in the west, far over the prairie lands. At last, Ma drew a long breath. "It's all so tame and peaceful. There will be no wolves or Indians howling at night. I haven't felt so safe and at rest since I don't know when." Pa's slow voice answered, "We're safe enough, all right. Nothing can happen here." The peaceful colors went all around the rim of the sky. The willows breathed and the water talked to itself in the dusk. The land was dark gray. The sky was light gray and stars prickled through it. "It's bedtime," Ma said. "And here is something new anyway. We've never slept in a dugout before." Huh. She was laughing and Pa laughed softly with her. Laura lay in bed and listened to the water talking and the willows whispering. She would rather sleep outdoor, even if she heard wolves, than to be safe in this house under the ground. So that was chapter 2. We'll hear more later. I hope you're enjoying it so far and imagining what it would be like to live in this little dugout house right next to a creek. It's fun to imagine, and now we have plenty of time to do it. All right, third grade, signing off for now. Bye.